So hello, my name is Nicholas Wagner. I'm with the International Renewable Energy Agency, and I'd like to welcome you today to IRENA's REmap 2030 Transport Action Team webinar focused on emerging biofuel production technologies and outlook for REmap 2030. Before we get into the presentations, I'd like to discuss a few things very quickly about this webinar series. For those of you not familiar with IRENA, we are an intergovernmental agency mandated by countries around the world to promote the widespread and sustainable use of all forms of renewable energy. IRENA has 143 member countries and 29 states in the process of becoming members. We would like to share a quick note that IRENA does not endorse or recommend specific products or services shared within its webinar series. Information in this webinar is featured in the IRENA Renewable Energy Learning Partnership database and the REmap webpage as just one of many sources of information on latest developments. If you are interested in finding out about future webinars offered through the IRENA webinar series or interested in further renewable energy learning opportunities, please visit the IRENA Renewable Energy Learning Partnership website. We will also continue today's discussion online at IRELP under the REmap discussion board. Any questions not answered today will be given to today's speakers and responses may be posted online. I would like to encourage everyone to participate in today's session by asking questions. To do so, simply select the questions panel on the right-hand bar and enter your question with a note to whom you would like the question directed. We will be collecting questions throughout the webinar and answering them at the end during the Q&A period. I'd also like to welcome you to mention your name and affiliation when asking the questions if you'd like to be acknowledged. If you would like to watch the webinar again or share it with a friend, a full recording will be available on the IRELP website as well as on the IRENA YouTube channel. Now to discuss the agenda today, it will begin today with a brief introduction about REmap 2030 and the transport sector findings. Then we will move on to a presentation by my colleague Maria Ayuso discussing the outlook for production and deployment of advanced biofuels over the next decades. These presentations will be short, and then we'll move on to our expert speakers. I'd like to thank our speakers for taking the time out of their busy schedules to give us presentations today. We will have three presentations. Mark Londo from the Energy Research Center of the Netherlands will present on market prospects for biofuels with a view on important regions. Gerald Weber, a researcher at Bioenergy 2020 Plus, will give us an in-depth dive into one of these technology processes and will overview production of second-generation biofuels based on biomass gasification. And finally, Jack Sadler of the University of British Columbia and co-leader of IEA Bioenergy Liquid Biofuels Task Force will overview biofuel uses in aviation and shipping. We will end today with about 15 minutes of Q&A based on questions, hopefully from the audience. I will briefly introduce REmap. REmap 2030 is IRENA's renewable energy roadmap, looking at energy system developments and the potential of renewables over the next 15 years to the year 2030. It explores the potential costs and benefits of doubling the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix. It's a unique program in that it is deeply engaging with countries. Currently, we have 40 countries engaged, representing 80% of global energy use. It is also unique in the sense that it looks at the entire energy system. So it looks at the supply side of power sector and district heat, but also the end use demand sectors of transport, buildings, and industry. REmap shows us that by 2030, under an accelerated renewables case, the breakdown of renewable energy and total final energy will look as you see in this pie graph. What's important to note is that around 2/3 of renewable energy will be in the form of fuels or fuels used for heating. They will be consumed in the end-use sectors of industry, transport, or the built environment. Approximately half of energy will be consumed for heating purposes, but important to note is the important role that transport fuels also play in this share. And so today we will focus on What in REmap we show could be potentially 13% of all renewable energy, which was biofuels used in the transport sector. We started this transport action team because we noticed in the results of our 2014 report that the transport sector of all end-use sectors and all sectors in general saw the least amount of renewables. It is also the sector that today has the lowest renewable share. It is the sector that over the next 15 years under a business as usual case sees the least amount of growth, roughly increasing from 3% today to 5%. It's also a sector that has tremendous growth potential, and in REmap we identified the potential to triple that share to 15%. Of course, to realize this necessitates action in all areas of sustainable transport. This includes, obviously, today's subject of biofuels. We show that there's potential for 4x growth over today's level. A significant share of that will be advanced biofuels, roughly a quarter. But it's important to take action in all areas. So, of course, in transport, it's necessary to explore additional technologies such as electric vehicles and structural change, modal shifts, moving people away from individual passenger transport. But today we'll stay focused on the biofuel topic. What we see in REmap is that we've had relatively stable but mostly modest growth over the last decade in biofuels. These have almost entirely been what we consider traditional biofuels, and the majority is bioethanol. In 2014, approximately 93 billion liters of bioethanol was produced and around 35 billion liters of biodiesel for a total of around 130. In REmap, we see the possibility that this could increase significantly. By 2020, we could have approximately 200 billion liters of biofuels. And by 2030, this number could increase significantly to 550 billion. Approximately 1/4 of that would be advanced, so around 135 billion liters of advanced biofuels. That's up from probably 1 billion today. So it's very significant growth. This is not business as usual. This is a realistic potential. We deemed as something that could happen, but we're not on this pathway today. So we are discussing what the potential of advanced biofuels and scaling up biofuels significantly would be, and that's what we will move on to in the following presentations. Of course, here at IRENA, we have more than just REmap. We have our transport action team, which includes REmap, which has mobilized around 100 experts focused on various themes, including biofuels, and includes not just webinars, but data exchange, information sharing, review, and events. New team members are welcome, so you're welcome to email us. There'll be an email at the end of this presentation for our email address if you're interested. We also have an upcoming report on innovation technology for advanced biofuels. My colleague Maria will introduce that here in a second. And we have other publications and activities, including technology briefs. I highly encourage you to go online and look at these. We have technology briefs for shipping, biogas, liquid biofuels, and an upcoming one on electric mobility. We have subsequent analyses that could be of interest, such as greenhouse gas emissions, life cycle analysis, bioenergy pathways analysis, and an upcoming transport roadmap. So with that, I'd like to turn over the mic to my colleague Maria Yuso to present the forthcoming project, Innovation Technology Outlook for Advanced Biofuels.
Thank you, Nick. So this presentation is indeed a brief overview of ARENA Innovation Technology Outlook of Advanced Biofuels. The purpose of this report is to provide a global technology outlook for advanced biofuels from 2015 to 2045, specifically liquid transfer fuels for use in the road, shipping, and aviation sectors as a replacement for gasoline, diesel, bunker, and jet fuels. The study focuses on the role of innovation, specifically those advanced biofuel pathways that have not so far reached large-scale commercialization. The study includes an overview of advanced biofuels, including a description of the market for advanced biofuels and an assessment of feedstock and conversion technologies. A comparative assessment of advanced biofuel pathways for current and potential technical, economic, and environmental performance. A comparative technical and non-technical barriers, needs, and opportunities relating to feedstock, infrastructure, technology, and financing to meet environmental, economic, and market requirements. a summary of promising pathways for advanced biofuels production in the next 3 decades, and commercialization strategies on how to best support the deployment of advanced biofuels. IRENA estimates that the global demand of advanced biofuels can reach 135 billion liters per year by 2030, or 25% of the total liquid biofuels market. To reach IRENA REmap option, an annual growth rate of around 20% would be required. In this innovation technology outlook of advanced biofuels, IRENA provides an inventory of current and planned advanced biofuel projects across the world, including the first-of-a-kind commercial plants, demonstration plants, and key pilot plants. According to this inventory, current installed production capacity for advanced biofuels is estimated at around 550 million liters per year, equivalent to 0.02% of liquid transport fuel demand. An additional 2 billion liters of annual capacity is planned. The 90 identified projects are a good starting point for further deployment of advanced biofuels production. Still, there is a huge potential to be harnessed. This poses also the question not only of where do we stand in terms of production installed capacity, but also where do we stand in terms of technological maturity of the conversion technologies. A number of combinations of feedstock and conversion technologies for production of advanced biofuel exists. This outlook focuses on 9 of these combinations or pathways to provide a comparative assessment of efficiency, production cost, and greenhouse gas emission saving. This figure shows the various conversion technologies considering the outlook and their different levels of technology readiness. It can be seen that a large proportion of the technologies are in the pilot and demonstration phase, and very few have already reached commercialization. The medium and long-term performance of each pathway is estimated in this outlook to formulate prospects of performance in the next 3 decades. A few preliminary findings further explored in the outlook are as follows. All pathways achieve a 60% reduction compared to the Renewable Energy Directive fossil reference of the European Commission, with pathways including gasification being characterized by the lowest emissions. Current production costs are in the range of $20 to $66 per gigajoule, except for algal oil transesterification and aqueous phase reforming. Based on potential improvements in conversion efficiency and reduction in capital costs, production costs may reach $20 per gigajoule for gasification processes to produce gasoline via methanol or ethanol via syngas fermentation or mixed alcohol synthesis. Feedstock cost might represent a major share of production cost, especially for the transesterification, where feedstock account for more than 90% of the overall production cost. More detailed information on feedstock and a specific capital investment cost is provided also in the outlook. Another important finding is that microalgae transesterification demonstrates the highest efficiency of around 92%. In any case, the advanced biofuel pathways analyzed in this report all face substantial technical and non-technical barriers to widespread commercial deployment. We are currently working to define key technical barriers relating to each of the main conversion steps involving advanced biofuel pathways, and what is needed for these advanced biofuel pathways to achieve commercialization. Non-technical barriers to advanced biofuels deployment are also compiled in this outlook and validated via stakeholders' interviews. The barriers found relate to uncertainty over political support and market access, financial and cost-effectiveness constraints, environmental and social impacts, as well as to the infrastructure required to commercialize advanced biofuels. Considering all these aspects, the outlook indicated a number of priority interventions to develop commercialization strategies that will overcome the value of these products. IRENA expects to publish its Innovation Technology Outlook of Advanced Biofuels by the end of this year. We strongly recommend you to download it from IRENA website without cost. The launch of this outlook will be announced on the IRENA community webpage in the group Innovation for Energy Transition, a space free of cost for entrepreneurs, innovators, and investors to discuss the latest research, development, and demonstration of renewable energy technologies and to announce related events. Thus, I will finish this presentation by also encouraging you to join this group. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maria. I'd like to introduce our first speaker today. He will present on market prospects for biofuels with a view on important regions. Mark Londo is a senior consultant at ECN, specializing in renewable energy and biofuels. He has experience in energy scenario studies, techno-economic assessment, and policy evaluation, primarily for policymakers. His biofuel project portfolio includes consultancy activities for the Dutch national government and the European Commission, and research activities for the EU programs and IEEA Bioenergy. Mark, let me go ahead and give you control of the presentation, and you can begin.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nick. If I'm not mistaken, you should be able to see my screen now. And now I only need to make it a bit smaller. Let me just see. Well, I assume, is it okay with you when it comes to your screen?
Can you enter full screen mode?
Yeah, how does it work again? Can you help me on that?
The small little...
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry. That's a simple one. Okay. Now I only have this screen. I still have the webinar information in my screen. I don't know if you can see it. Now it's gone. Great. Okay, thank you very much, Nick. I would like to shortly go through a review of let's say, short to mid-term market prospects for biofuels, with also some focus on some regions and some key challenges. The key content is inderdaad a market outlook on the global level and some regional estimates, and let's say key factors affecting these market prospects, focusing on policies, markets of oil and agricultural commodities, and key technology developments required with this. To start with the global outlooks, essentially I'm checking two key sources on this, and that is first the IEA. This is a graph from last year's medium-term renewable energy market report by the IEA, which does show that after a recent quite strong growth in biofuels in general, we're now entering a period in which, at least in the short term, there's more modest growth than it was in the past years. I have some breakdowns further, but you see that especially in the United States and to a lesser extent Europe have had strong growth in the recent past, but are now more on a stabilization pathway. The story is different for the rest of the world, for example. That's the IEA. Another quite authoritative source when it comes to biofuels outlook is the FAO. The FAO Agricultural outlook, since a couple of years already, has quite an extensive chapter on biofuels. And here you see two graphs from the most recent FAO Agricultural outlook showing growth pathways for bioethanol on the left-hand side and biodiesel on the right-hand side. FAO is a bit more, let's say, has a slightly higher growth rates for the coming decade for biofuels, in which you also see that for ethanol, in relative terms, the growth is a bit more modest than the growth in biodiesel. On the other hand, you also see that, as already has been said, that the global market for bioethanol is now currently a couple of times bigger than the biodiesel market. So in absolute terms, also in the near-term future, bioethanol remains the dominant biofuel. FAO also says something which is illustrative on the key production regions and what they are producing. For bioethanol, the key global leaders, you could say, are the United States and Brazil. And then there is a wider variety of other countries, including the European Union, China, and some smaller countries, which make up the big chunk of bioethanol. But the United States and Brazil are here the key leading countries. For biodiesel, the division is a bit more heterogeneous. The European Union is here leader, with around 1/3 of total production. By the way, these are not current estimates, but these are the shares by 2024. I should have started by saying that. On the other hand, of course, they also had pictures of this for the current situation, and these markets are not changing dramatically. There are some changes between today and 2024, but it's no major shifts. To go back to the biodiesel production, Indonesia is currently expected to be number 2 by 2024, and then there are also shares for the United States, Brazil, Argentina, and some other countries and regions. Now, what are expected to be the key feedstocks for these biofuels in the coming 10 years? Again, this is a picture from the FAO Agricultural Outlook. And what you see here is that for the blue lines are, let's say, essentially the current production shares of different feedstocks, and the gray line, the bars, are the ones that are expected for 2024. It's all relative, so it's not absolute amounts here, but relative shares of different feedstocks on the x-axis. And when it comes to biodiesel, then vegetable oils are the dominant feedstock. For example, for the EU, that is mainly composed of rapeseed and rapeseed oil. In Asia, that is merely palm oil. And for several other regions like Latin America and the United States, also soybean oil plays an important role. The second best, or the second in size feedstock for biodiesel is typically waste oils and fats. It's here grouped in the category other. You should think of residue frying oils, but also animal slaughter fats and that kind of material that contains fatty acids which can easily be converted into biodiesel. For ethanol, the leading countries, United States and Brazil, they typically make use of coarse grains, typically corn in the United States, and sugar crops like sugarcane in Brazil. Those are currently, and also in the future, the dominant feedstocks. And then there's a variety of other smaller scale types of feedstock with smaller sizes. You also see here that there are some changes predicted between now and 2024. But on the other hand, for example, there is a bit of change between sugarcane, which is increasing in share, and corn decreasing in share. But the big chunks of feedstocks remain relatively stable. What you also see here is, well, what about advanced biofuels? Well, these are, of course, typically made of let's say, biomass in the case of biodiesel, general description of woody or straw-like material, and typically lignocellulosic biomass for ethanol. And the predictions of the agricultural outlook are that these shares by 2024 remain quite modest. And in this, of course, you should imagine and you should be aware that this is typically an outlook that the FAO makes under current policy regimes. So here's not an estimate of potentials of, let's say, a necessary required contribution towards climate targets, but this is typically under current and expected developments and policy circumstances, what can be expected from advanced biofuels. And in this estimate, that is relatively modest. As a comparison for that, when we think about these advanced lignocellulosic biomass options, this is a graph from the energy technology perspectives from last year's IEA publication. And here you do see that for a 2 degrees target on the long run, the necessary shares of advanced biofuels are substantially higher than they are in the global FAO outlook. So this means that if we take the 2 degrees Celsius as a starting point, then also the development of advanced biofuels should be increasing substantially. Not only of advanced biofuels, by the way. If you compare the growth rates of, let's say, conventional biodiesel and ethanol in this graph with the former graph, then you also see that quite further substantial growth is needed from these conventional biofuels. Okay, what is there to be said about regional estimates? I have two graphs on that. This is, let's say, a short summary of what the IEA Medium-Term Renewable Energy Market Report of last year said about that. In North America, you typically see a current stabilization of biofuels production. That has to do with a couple of factors. There has been a recent reduction of the policy targets on biofuels. That was, let's say, a reduction of the absolute amount. What also is affecting the growth rate of biofuels is the declining gasoline fuel demand in the United States because of, for example, the economic crisis. Fuel efficiency of vehicles gets much more attention today than it had, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago in the US. Also, the share of bioethanol in gasoline sales is already to such an extent that there starts to turn out blending wall issues. Without any further adaptations to vehicles and infrastructure, it's not possible to endlessly increase further the ethanol share. So here's a blending wall issue that needs to be settled, and of course that takes time in adaptation of vehicles and adaptation of infrastructure. The United States does have a specific sub-target for advanced biofuels. That's also a difference with, for example, the European Union. But the sector shows that it has great difficulties in meeting them on the short term. And it also means that, well, I mean, you can have targets, but if technology doesn't keep up, there's at least an issue which affects the sector. Also, the biodiesel production and sales are, well, let's say, stabilizing in North America. The situation in Europe is such that there will be some growth expected towards 2020. And that is mainly because a couple of months ago, a long-lasting policy uncertainty has been resolved, which had to do with, let's say, sustainability of biofuels, the discussion on how to deal with indirect land use change issues, and what that would mean for the overall 10% objective that was already in the Renewable Energy Directive issued a couple of years ago, and also how that would lead to crop-based biofuels. After an extensive discussion and a lot of uncertainty, it has now been agreed upon that there will be a 7% cap on crop-based biofuels, which is essentially, all conventional biofuels except the ones based on, for example, residue and waste oils and fats. And there is a 0.5 indicative target for advanced biofuels. Indicative means that countries and member states are invited to meet the target, but when they don't meet it, they need to motivate why, but there's no clear penalty or other sanction on not meeting it. One thing adding to quite some uncertainty on the longer term in Europe is that there's no clear biofuels target for 2030. There's not even yet a clear target for the transportation sector. European Commission has come to an agreement on a overall 27% target for renewable energy by 2030 as part of a 40% greenhouse gas reduction target. But what the role of the transport sector will be has been calculated and estimated, but it's not a specific target. And also for biofuels, there's no clear framework yet after 2020. So that typically means that, particularly for advanced biofuels, the situation after 2020 is quite uncertain, and that's of course a major drawback for investments in technology development and investment in installations. On the contrast, Latin America shows a steady growth. Most countries in the region have stable or increasing mandates, so there is a governmental policy that spurs further development. Although, for example, in Brazil, there have recently been quite low margins in sugarcane-based ethanol, for example, on the basis of because of the lower fossil oil prices. On the other hand, the prospects for exports from Latin America to other regions in the world were quite optimistic, quite good recent years, although there are some decreasing export opportunities for biodiesel. But all in all, this picture leads to a steady growth in Latin America. Then there are still some emerging markets like Southeast Asia and partly also Africa. And there we see, although their starting positions are very small, there is a strong growth currently and also expected in the near term. And that is mainly because there are new blending mandates in many countries in Asia and also in Africa, which are, let's say, motivated, well, not that much from a climate change mitigation perspective, but mainly because these countries have an energy security issue. Quite often, especially in developing countries, importing oil is a major weight on their trade balance, and especially if their rural environment has opportunities to produce domestic feedstocks for biofuels, that's typically a way of improving energy security and also providing for rural development. Especially for Asian countries, there's also an opportunity to export, for example, vegetable oils like palm oil to other regions in the world to meet the domestic mandates over there. If you look at I won't go into the full details of this very complex table, but essentially the key findings of the former slide are confirmed by the relative growth rates that you see here on the right-hand side in a full table of growth percentages and absolute numbers of growth estimated until 2020. That's again the IEA medium-term market report, in which you see that, for example, Africa, which has a very small share of current biofuels, it's a very small amount, has major growth rates expected for the coming time, while, for example, the United States has, of course, the largest share of biofuels production and consumption, but has a very moderate growth rate for the coming 5 years expected. Now to conclude, what are key uncertain factors in, let's say, these market prospects for the coming, say, 10 years of biofuels? Well, in the first place, biofuel policies. As long as biofuels are still substantially more expensive than fossil fuels, and in most cases that's the case, then and let's say a stable and predictable policy for biofuels is essential. And you see that in most countries, mandates are, let's say, the policy workhorse for biofuels. This picture from the Global Renewable Fuel Alliance shows in which regions of the world there are mandates on biofuels. And that's the majority of countries in which there is a biofuel policy in the first place. Quite often, such mandates are accompanied by supporting policies such as tax incentives, either to producers or to, let's say, the distributors and the consumers. Sometimes there are also, let's say, incentives for infrastructure development, and particularly for advanced biofuels, there's quite some R&D support given by several economies. So that is the good thing. In that sense, there is quite a good understanding of how to get biofuels to the market and how to create an interesting case for growth and development of biofuels in a certain country. On the other hand, biofuels still come at a cost, and a mandate doesn't lead to direct cost for a government, but it does lead to a cost to society, because in the end consumers need to pay for the additional cost of biofuels. And well, the sustainability dispute on biofuels still goes on. I mean, I think we had quite a frenzy on this debate between 2008 and 2012 or so, in which biofuels were essentially blamed for all the bad things in the world, including, let's say, deforestation, the food crisis, all kinds of things like that. Although quite some of these issues appear not to be as dramatic, let's say the role of biofuels in these crises appears not to be as dramatic as might have been said before. There are still issues that need to be discussed further, and that does lead to, let's say, also to policymakers being hesitant in going forward with biofuels without further consideration. And I think that's the right thing to do, because you need to do the good thing. If biofuels should be part of a climate change mitigation strategy, then you should at least be certain that the biofuels that you provide incentives for also really can contribute to mitigating climate change, and don't lead to additional greenhouse gas emissions through backdoors like indirect land use change, deforestation, and peat burning, to mention some potential disasters that have been related to biofuels. So that essentially means that there is some inherent uncertainty on policy frameworks. In the worst case, this indeed leads to hesitant policy development. In the best case, this leads to further activities in getting better grip on sustainability, in getting better grip on how to provide sustainable and responsible feedstock. Well, in that sense, I'm quite convinced that we will get to sustainable biofuels, and we'll develop the sector further, but it does require quite some efforts, not only from the energy sector, but also from the land use sectors, from agricultural sectors. It's quite an integrative issue in that sense. Now, of course, the developments in the oil and agricultural markets are also key to the prospects of biofuels, particularly on the short term. On the one hand, you can say, well, a mandate, the good thing about a mandate is that it essentially creates a separate market for biofuels, and then, well, the role of oil prices is not that essential. On the other hand, of course, if oil prices go up, the financial gap for society to overcome using biofuels is much smaller than when the oil prices are low. So in that sense, also policymakers are sensitive to developments in the oil price when they talk about biofuels incentives. One of the relatively reassuring things here is that oil and agricultural markets are quite intertwined. You see here that this is a recent graph of current oil price developments. This is let's say, a graph of what happened to the agricultural commodity prices in the recent 1.5 years or so. And there you do see that while recently oil prices went down, also quite some agricultural commodities went down in their price. Also, when you take pictures of agricultural commodities on a slightly longer term, you do see quite some correlation between oil prices and agricultural commodity prices. And that's quite understandable as an illustration, especially in developing countries. almost 50% of the production costs of agricultural crops are composed of fossil energy. So there's a clear relation between energy costs and agricultural commodity production costs. One thing is important here still, that is, let's say, the developments in agricultural commodities do have different implications for conventional and advanced biofuel options. And that directly relates me to my last slide. What about technology development? How will advanced biofuels come into the market? Well, one thing to stress first is advanced technologies are key for the long-term success of biofuels. They're essential in broadening the resource base, also by moving from dedicated agricultural crops to residues and generally low-grade biomass. And such feedstocks and such chains generally have a much better sustainability profile, both in direct greenhouse gas emission profiles, but also in their impacts on, for example, land use change, and water consumption. So there you can say, if we really need to go to high shares of biofuels, we can't do without advanced technologies, advanced biofuels. What you can also say, I think, is that middle distillates, or in general, biofuels that can replace diesel-like fuels are very essential. Because also when you look at the prospects of the transportation sector and the decarbonization of it, then the sectors that are very difficult to address by, for example, electric vehicles or fuel cell vehicles are aviation, shipping, and long distance trucking. And these are typically the sectors in transport which use middle distillates, no gasoline, but diesel and kerosene and the heavier fuels. On top of that, in Europe we have the problem that the gasoline-diesel split of the refinery capacity is more leaning towards gasoline than demand is. So generally Europe is long in gasoline and short in diesel. Well, that leads to a European focus on diesel replacers, because it also leads to a better balance between production and consumption of liquid fuels. Globally, that picture is different, of course. Well, as an illustration on, let's say, the long-term importance of advanced biofuels, this is a picture from the IEA Biofuels Roadmap from some years ago. The graph so far I showed you were going through to 2030, but here you typically see that after this year, in the decades between 2030 and 2050, if we take our climate change mitigation seriously, then we need to rely quite strongly on conventional ethanol and also conventional biodiesel and advanced bioethanol, advanced biodiesel, and also biojet fuel, which is typically also related to advanced production processes. So that's quite an important thing to get there. On the other hand, I also said that the technologies that we need for that are still complex. Maria already showed a graph in which you could see that quite some of these technologies are still in the pilot or the demo phase. They need to go through their learning curve and cross the valley of death. And their typical susceptibility is to policy uncertainty, the uncertainty that I already talked about. And just as an illustrated graph, very capital intensive technologies like advanced biofuels have difficulties in responding to uncertainties in the market. If you have a biodiesel plant, which is 90% variable costs and 10% capital cost, if the market goes down for a while, you can shut the thing down for a while, and you'll get in business back if the prospects improve again. Advanced technologies have the problem that they have high investment costs upfront, and that means that they can't easily respond to variations in feedstock prices or generally in variations in the business case of their product. So they're more susceptible to volatilities in biofuels prices. On the other hand, of course, they're less susceptible to feedstock prices because that is a smaller part of their total cost basis. Well, I think these were some of the sketches that I would want to share with you on the market prospects for biofuels. Thank you very much for your attention. I would like to give the word back to the chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mark. And thank you very much for the comprehensive overview. I think shed a lot of light into the near and medium-term outlook for biofuels and regions. I will introduce our next speaker, and I'd like to kindly request that all speakers try to stick to time, 10 to 12 minutes. But our next speaker will go into more depth about one specific type of technology, that's biomass gasification. He is Dr. Gerald Weber. He works as researcher at Bioenergy 2020 Plus, an organization focused on advancing research and development of bioenergy technologies. He is an expert in the fields of Fischer-Tropsch and mixed alcohols at the University of Applied Sciences in Bielefeld, Austria. So with that, let me give over the mic and presentation to Dr. Weber.
Hello, do you see my screen?
Yes, if you can make just full screen presentation mode, we'll be good. Okay, yes. Perfect. Yep, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start my presentation with a short introduction of our company. I'm working for Bioenergy 2020 Plus. It's a competence center founded according to the rules of the COMET program from Austria. We have three areas of research. Area 1, biomass combustion systems. Area 2, biomass gasification systems, and Area 3 is dealing with biogas systems. I'm working for Area 2. In Area 2, our scientific partner is the Technical University of Vienna, and we have several company partners like Güssing Renewable Energy, Repotec, Mondi, and so on. When we talk about biomass gasification, we also talk about green chemistry. So we take biomass, woody biomass, gasify it with different agents like steam, oxygen, different gasification technologies like dual fluidized bed, fixed bed. And then we're coming to a valuable synthesis gas. It's rich in hydrogen and carbon monoxide. The standard process you can say now for this is to produce electricity and heat. Here in Güssing with our dual fluidized bed gasification technology, we have over 80,000 hours of operation of the gasifier and also of the gas engine. But with this synthesis gas, you can also do a lot of other things in research. For example, we are working on synthetic natural gas, Fischer-Tropsch fuels, mixed alcohols, and one new project is to produce and separate hydrogen from this gas. On this slide you see a flowchart of the dual fluidized bed CHP plant in Güssing. At the beginning you see here, you have here the gasification. We have here the feed for the biomass. We are using steam as gasification agent and have a temperature of around 850 degrees. We're producing then the synthesis gas, which must be further treated. You must cool down the gas. You must separate dust, char, and tar. And then it's clean enough for the gas engine. Before the gas engine, we have a slipstream for the synthesis gas. And for this is for our research facilities. On this slide you see our R&D activities in Güssing. We are working on synthetic natural gas, Fischer-Tropsch synthesis, mixed alcohol synthesis, and also on the production of hydrogen. Today I will present you the project, so the synthetic natural gas project and Fischer-Tropsch synthesis. At first here to talk about technological development, coming from an idea to industrial scale. This takes normally several years. You see here an example for the Bio-SNG project. You see a picture here from lab scale. This was started in 2002. Then the demo plant in Güssing was erected in the year 2008. And then now one of the first industrial plants in Göteborg with 20 megawatt. So in principle you can say it's taking time of around 10 years to come from a little lab scale plant to an industrial plant. We are working mainly on lab scale, pilot and demo plant. Here at the bottom you see the FT lab scale plant, and now we're working here on the pilot plant to upscale Fischer-Tropsch to 1 barrel per day production capacity. And probably in the year 2017 there is the possibility to build an industrial plant. What is the status of technological development? Coming from gasification-based CHP to poly generation plants. As how I said before, in Güssing we have a Bio-SNG plant in demonstration scale. 1 megawatt was the first test runs we carried out in 2009. Then we have a hydrogen plant in laboratory scale, was taken in operation 2013. For Fischer-Tropsch, we have a laboratory scale plant, production capacity between 5 to 10 kilogram per day. This was erected in the year 2005. And now we're working on pilot scale for Fischer-Tropsch. And we have also mixed alcohol synthesis plant. Also in laboratory scale, it's in the scale of 2 liter per day, was erected 2011. So at first to the Bio-SNG project. This was erected 2008 and was taken in operation in the year 2009. It's with 1 megawatt power. It's a pilot and demonstration of the complete process chain from wood to Bio-SNG at a very high efficiency rate. At the right side you see a picture of this demo plant, and under this picture there is the companies which were involved in this project. So several companies were worked on this project. It was also tested to compress this natural gas and to fill then CNG cars with it. And they drive then several thousand hours to test it. On this slide you see also here the flow chart of this process. You're also starting with gasification and gas cleaning, and then you're coming to the methanization plant. Normally you have here 3 stages. At first you must pre-clean the gas, so you must remove sulfur components and aromatics. Then you're coming to the methanization step, where there you produce really then the methane. And afterwards you have the CNG cleaning, because you must separate other gas components like CO and H2 that have a very high amount of methane in the product. Here now some of the results. The results were in line with the expectations of the project. It was possible to produce CNG with a quality of 96% of methane content, and the quality of this produced Bio-SNG also exceeded the expectations. The pilot plant was successfully run to the designed values. The produced gas was fulfilling the requirements for the cars, for the CNG cars, and also the pipeline specifications. Here in this table you see the regulations for Germany and Austria for pipelines, and you see here our Bio-SNG, and you see that from the Wapper index, relative density and higher heating value, it was in this specification, so from very high and good quality. The next route I want to present you is the route synthetic biofuels, the Fischer-Tropsch route, coming from cellulose, polylose and lignin to iso and N-paraffins, hydrocarbons. Here you see now also the flow chart. You're coming from gasification process. Again, you must clean the gas, we must compress the gas as we must prepare it for the synthesis. And then H2 and CO have coming to a reaction and producing your product, your Fischer-Tropsch fuels and Fischer-Tropsch waxes. These produced waxes can further be treated with hydroprocessing, and you have then a second amount of fuel. It's then hydroprocessed Fischer-Tropsch diesel, which has also a little bit different composition than the normal Fischer-Tropsch fuel. In Güssing we have a lab scale plant. It's fully automated and it's operated since 2005. We are producing 5 to 10 kilogram per day. We are using a slurry reactor technology because it has an excellent heat transfer, and also it's easier to scale up than other reactor technologies. The gas treatment sections of this plant is able to remove the sulfur to below 10 ppb, so we can make long-time experiments without any deactivation of the catalyst. And we are testing cobalt and iron-based catalysts for this synthesis. Here are some of the results of this project. So in principle we reached about 6,000 hours of operation with the lab scale plant. The Fischer-Tropsch waxes were hydroprocessed for enlarging the amount of diesel, and also with this Fischer-Tropsch diesel and this hydroprocessed Fischer-Tropsch diesel there were test runs carried out with combustion engines, and we can say that this Fischer-Tropsch diesel has a very high standard of quality. The combustion emits nearly no soot, it has a very high C10 number, and you can see this on the right side of the slide. There's a comparison between Fischer-Tropsch diesel, hydroprocessed Fischer-Tropsch diesel and normal fossil diesel. The C10 number is much higher. Normally for fossil diesel it's in the area of 51, says the legislation, and in Fischer-Tropsch diesel we had over 70, and the hydroprocessed Fischer-Tropsch diesel has had nearly 70 also. The cold flow behavior of the normal Fischer-Tropsch diesel is a little bit not so good than fossil diesel, but when we look at the hydroprocessed Fischer-Tropsch diesel, we have an excellent cold flow behavior and excellent fuel. It's also the in dependency to the composition of the of the product because it's synthetic, so there's nearly no, you can see here really no aromatics and very high amount of enalkanes, and this is also responsible for the higher C10 number. At the bottom of the slide, you can see a comparison between the Fischer-Tropsch diesel. Hydroprocessed Fischer-Tropsch diesel was tested in combustion engines and was compared to normal fossil diesel. This is the red line, and you can see that when you're taking Fischer-Tropsch and hydroprocessed Fischer-Tropsch diesel, the emissions of hydrocarbons, CO, and also the particle emissions were significantly reduced, over 40% with the hydroprocessed Fischer-Tropsch diesel. So you can say that from the properties it's an excellent fuel. Coming now to the economic considerations, we must say it's a very complex technology, the gasification and also the synthesis. So we have very high investment costs. These are raw estimates. These numbers, you can say that between 1 and 1.5 million euros per megawatt gasification power must be invested for such a plant. But this is also strongly depending on the used technology and the scale you are. From the efficiency, from the input material to the transportation fuel, we're in an area of 40 to 70%, so that's much worse than a refinery. Refineries have an efficiency of over 90%, but it's much better than, for example, to produce electricity with the biomass, because then you're in an efficiency range between 20 and 30%. When you look at the total efficiency, when you take the products fuel, heat and electricity, you have an efficiency over 80%, which is very high. The fuel costs have very high influence on the production costs. It's over 50% of the production costs are coming from the fuel price, and around 30% are coming from investment costs. What are the problems? The problems for sure are the high investment costs and also the security of supply of biomass. This is also quite important. On this table you see here, you see a comparison between the calculated production costs of Fischer-Tropsch and Bio-SNG compared to competitive fuels. We can see here that with Fischer-Tropsch we're in the area of 0.6 to 1 euro per liter, and for Bio-SNG between 0.7 and 0.9 euro per non-cubic meter. So we are higher than, like, for example, biodiesel, but with further research and when there are more plants, industrial plants, then the price will go down for sure. I'm coming to my conclusion. So the interest for the production of transportation fuels for trucks and jets are rising. This is caused mainly by security of supply and climate change issue. The main interests are focused on the use of advanced biofuels, second generation. There are several different gasification technologies are used for the production of synthesis gas from biomass, but only the dual fluid bed steam gasification technology is in commercial operation, so there are several plants all over the world, but only for combined heat and power, not for synthesis gas applications. The research topic of our company in the field of syngas utilization is Bio-SNG, Fischer-Tropsch, mixed alcohols, and biohydrogen. The main advantage of such synthetic natural gas is the very high conversion efficiency of up to 70%. Hydrogen is in the area of around 60%, Fischer-Tropsch between 40 to 45%, and mixed alcohols around 40%. Our future research activities are more focused on Fischer-Tropsch. We are now working on the upscaling to the pilot scale of 1 barrel per day, and this should be reached next year, middle next year, so 2016. On the long term, there is no alternative to advanced biofuels, because hydrocarbons will be the main fuel for the next decades. So now at the end, thank you for your attention, and I give back the word to the organizer. Thank you.
Gerald, thank you very much, particularly for staying on time. It was a very technical presentation, but I think shed some very interesting insight into a few projects, some of the processes and costs associated with those, and we did receive some very interesting questions we'll ask here later. I will now turn over to, one second. Okay. I'd like to now introduce our final speaker. He'll be presenting on the potential for biofuel in aviation and shipping. He is a professor at the University of British Columbia. He's received numerous awards, has authored many papers. He also happens to be co-task leader of the IEA Bioenergy Liquid Biofuels Task 39, the Liquid Biofuels Task Agreement. And he's also a leader of a research group of about 20 graduate students and postdocs. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jacques Sadler. Let me give you control of your screen and the mic.
Thanks, Nick. I'm just going to try and wait till the screen changes here. So can you hear me here?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Yeah, I'm just trying to increase the size of the stuff here. Hang on a second. Okay, is the full screen coming up?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so first of all, I want to thank Nick and IRENA for giving the opportunity to present the information here. I also want to thank my colleagues Suzanne van Dijk, Jim McMillan at NREL, Sergius Karatos, and particularly my colleagues at IEA headquarters, because I was fortunate to be in sabbatical there, where I was able to work on this topic. So the presentation is mostly going to be covering some of the work that our IEA 39 implementation agreement has been working on. If I can click to the next slide. Nick, can you move it on? Nick, can you move the slide on?
No, this is on your screen. Maybe you need to click on your PowerPoint presentation on the bottom and then move forward.
Yeah, I'm trying to escape, and it will not let me escape. So,
can you try clicking at the bottom on your PowerPoint?
Yeah, I've been trying.
Go now.
Try now.
Now you should advance the slide. There you go.
Yeah. So Task 39 is really has 15 countries involved. What I encourage, I'm going to be going through this pretty fast because it's a hard topic to cover about 12 minutes. So if you go on to the Task 39 website, I'll be making reference a lot to the drop-in report that our group has worked on. But if you go on the Task 39 website, the benefit is actually having all the different member countries with their input into the various things that we've been doing. It will not click on.
I think you need to click again on your PowerPoint presentation on the bottom. On there you go. And now
okay. Yep. Got it. So the what I'm going to cover here is some of the long distance transportation. This is where our Task 13 recognized this as an important topic quite a few years ago. This is where we can't use ethanol or biodiesel. Also, it can't be electrified. So if you look at aviation, shipping, long distance trucking, it's too long, so it can't use batteries. And another big driver, of course, is to do something about both greenhouse gas emissions and sulfur emissions. So that was the motivation for doing this work. If we look at the overall distribution of transportation, you can see over on the right, light duty automotive, which is about half, so we can use the ethanol and the diesel there. But when we start looking at where we need drop-in, this really covers aviation, marine, and long distance lorries or trucks, which is about 37%. So again, a significant area, and an area that's expected to increase. So aviation and long distance trucking, particularly in places like Asia, is all expected to increase. So we look at the aviation industry. Fuel represents about 1/3 of their operational costs, so significant. It's already about 2 to 3% of global CO2 emissions, and this is expected to increase much higher proportionally, particularly with growth of aviation in Asia and South Africa. Also, the point making here when we talk about jet fuel and also marine fuel, it's almost like two extremes. Jet fuel has very high specifications. Marine fuel has, I would say, not high specifications. So the aviation industry, as I'll show in the next few slides, has an interest in biofuels. If you look at some of the targets, by 2020, they want to have carbon neutral growth of the aviation sector, and a very ambitious target by 2050, which is a 50% reduction of CO2 compared to 2005 levels. And the motivation is mostly security of supply, and also to get some price stability, as evidenced over just the last year in terms of going from $100 a barrel of oil down to about 45. So if you go on the ATAC website, the Air Transport Action Group, you can see the projections that they are able to reduce the carbon emissions by some of the ground transport in terms of using refueling any of the vehicles that help refuel the planes moving towards electric. So at the top of the graph, you can actually see where I think there's good confidence that they will be able to reduce the carbon emissions as compared to no action. But half of what you see is particularly biofuels. So in order to reach the carbon neutral growth by 2050, at least half of the action will have to be in the development of biofuels. If you look at the interest in this area, it's been considerable. So again, I think it first started to get on the radar probably about 10 years ago. This slide really shows, which is from our Sky Energy, covers all the airlines and what has been happening. I won't spend time on it, but if, one of the points is that of the about over 1,500 flights in the 21 airlines, 90% of these flights are actually based on what we've called oleochemical fats, so not really biomass-derived material. It's really been high processed esters and fatty acids, or some of the synthetic kerosenes. And even though the volumes seem a lot, this is still a relatively small amount of fuel that's being used, and this is where we've used the term boutique. So I think one of the points that the report comes through is that we think the supply chain for aviation, probably marine, will initially be based on oleochemical feedstocks. So where we are with regard to certification is that we have 3 routes to drop in our aviation fuel approved already. We have the Fischer-Tropsch route. I should mention, though, that actually is based on Fischer-Tropsch of coal rather than of biomass. However, it should end up with the same product. The HEFA was certified in 2011, and also the kerosene, the isoparaffin route, was recently certified. What we're hoping in the very near term, so in the next year or two, the alcohol to jet and the also depolarized cellulose to jet should all be certified. So we'll have 5 certified routes probably by the middle of next year. But again, it's worth mentioning that the commercial volumes right now are actually all pretty well HEFA derived, and this is about 3 billion litres of diesel. And again, as I'll touch on in a bit, this comes from a variety of feedstocks. So if I compare aviation with shipping, again, there's a bit of an extreme here, because with aviation there's strict certification. There's a narrow specification with regard to what the fuel should look like in terms of the carbon number, the freeze point, viscosity, etc. You also need substantial processing to make biojet, and again, I don't have time to go into technical, but if you go into the Task 39 report, you'll see this in detail. So again, if you look at the various routes to making biojet, you can see it's pretty rigorous. This is contrasted on the right here with shipping, where there's a wide range of specifications, and we've put down here is very forgiving. There's actually limited process required to make the biofuel, and there's actually quite a few ranges of going everything from pure vegetable oil through to pyrolysis oil. So again, it's interesting comparing aviation and shipping because they are quite different. The reason for the interest in the shipping is if you look at the growth of the shipping sector since about 1997, you then look at the CO2 emissions, you can see again this substantial increase as the years go by. If we then look at the interest around the world in terms of what we're going to do about this, really the biggest driver is the MARPOL Convention, which is really looking at all emissions. This is not just CO2. It's really mostly focused in on sulfur dioxide and nitrogen from ship exhaust. And as you can look at the colors here, you can see this is already implemented in coastal North America and in Baltic and Northern European regions. But this is really still at the discussion stages in places like the Mediterranean or around Australasia or around Japan, China. So this is really an evolving area with regard to regulation. But to stress the importance in this slide here, if you look at now the million tons of CO2 emitted from the shipping sector, you can see that if nothing is done by 2050, there's basically going to be close to a tripling of CO2 emissions, and this is why within the box there's certainly a lot of interest to develop some alternative fuels to actually do something about these CO2 emissions. Again, too much detail to go into within a 12-minute presentation, so we recommend you actually go onto the IRENA website, where there's a recent report on renewable options for shipping. Also, you go on the International Energy Advanced Motor Fuels website, and you look at a recent report there on alternative fuels. So 2 good reports for further detail. And again, company Good Fuels is going to be having a meeting in October. So if you go on the website at the bottom here, again, you can get more information. So the recommendation is these are 3 sources you can go to for further information. But to summarize the technical aspect, if you look at the slide here, and this is taken from the IRENA report, the report does a very good job of summarizing the different fuels that can be used in the shipping sector. It covers really what feedstocks are, what basically some of the advantages and some of the challenges. And again, you will see that it's heavily biased towards oleochemical or plant or animal fat-derived fuels, as compared to some of the biomass fuels, which are still very much in the evolutionary part of development. To kind of, in the last 5 minutes, to cover some of the more technical aspects of what we've been calling drop-in fuels. Again, one of the challenges is going from a carbohydrate, actually has quite a lot of oxygen, as you can see here, to a hydrocarbon, so that you end up with a petroleum-like biofuel. So effectively, from a technical point of view, you're trying to get rid of the oxygen from the carbohydrate and basically replace that with hydrogen. So if you look at our Task 39 report, you see that one of the challenges in the short to mid-term is where you get the hydrogen, because the hydrogen will probably come from natural gas, which again is not so good from a carbon emission point of view. So again, going on to the Task 39 website, you can see that the bioethanol and biodiesel, really we can use it as a blend, but it's not the same as gasoline and diesel. It's not readily compatible with the infrastructure, except possibly in Brazil. As I mentioned before, drop-in fuels are really the only alternative for aviation and shipping. And one of the benefits with being a member of Task 39 is we spent a bit of time trying to better define what we meant by a drop-in biofuel, really getting hung up initially on the chemistry. But I think the definition that has been accepted by large is that a drop-in biofuel is a liquid hydrocarbon that's functionally equivalent to petroleum fuel and is fully compatible with the existing petroleum infrastructure. So that's what we've suggested in the report you can access is a good compromise in terms of the definition of a drop-in biofuel. So this report covers the definition. It highlights the fact that the source of the hydrogen for the drop-in fuels is going to be a challenge. It also touches on briefly on the supply chain challenges, but the report mostly looks at the various technical routes to making drop-in biofuels. The oleochemical, using things such as palm oil, used cooking oil, canola, hydrotreated vegetable oil, the various biochemical routes such as amyris with isoprenoids, GEVO making butanol, and really the thermochemical routes, primarily pyrolysis and gasification, and a hybrid. So again, I could have taken a couple of hours at least to discuss the technologies, but if you go into the drop-in report, it will be summarized and covered there. This is the report here. The big benefit with being part of the IA is we put here just some of the logos because the various drafts of the report were sent out to these various technology providers or potential users. So I think the report has gone through a fairly rigorous review, and I think it does a fairly good job of summarizing where we are with the technologies right now. Also, I think the report got quite a lot of profile in the Biofuels Digest. I think probably many of the people listening on here might have access. So again, it got quite a good profile. So the dilemma of making drop-in fuels is that we've got to take a feedstock such as biomass and make something that has low or no oxygen. It requires hydrogen inputs, and one of the reasons why the oleochemical route, so basically going from palm oil, used cooking oil, is attractive, is has much lower oxygen and lipids than we have in carbohydrates, so it's well suited to being used as a drop-in. This very busy slide here tries to summarize all the various technologies, going from really the sun that makes the biomass or the sugar, going the various routes such as the fermentation top, I'd mentioned before, GEVO and amyris, using things such as we just heard about in terms of syngas and Fischer-Tropsch with companies like FAO and also the pyrolysis route with companies such as Ensign. So again, the report covers in a lot more detail these various ways of actually making the drop-in report, and they all have their various strengths and weaknesses. I just want to highlight the oleochemical platform because this is what we think will really be the technology used in the short term to establish the supply chain. It's a relatively simple technology, so it's low risk, it's already commercialized, and it's basically already certified. As I mentioned, there's a high hydrogen to carbon ratio in the feedstock, and really feedstocks range from palm oil through to tallow, some of the rendered animal fats. However, the challenge for this area is not so much technical, it's more on the cost of the feedstock, because the feedstock tends to be very high, and there's also challenges with regard to sustainability, so you tend to run into some of these food versus fuel issues when in actual fact it should be food and fuel issues. To give you an idea of the facilities globally right now, the highest profile one is Neste, who currently makes about 2.5 billion litres of diesel from mixed feedstock, so it does use palm oil, but it uses a range of oleochemicals. Dynamic Fuels in the US does it from rendered animal fat, use cooking oil, and Pre and UPM in Scandinavia is making it from tall oil, which I think is a very sustainable way in terms of using a byproduct from pulp and paper processing. So, summary, there's probably too much text in here, but the summary is the areas such as aviation shipping will have to use drop-in biofuels, and aviation and shipping are good to compare because one's very high spec and one is relatively low spec. There are various technology pathways to make drop-in, each with its own strengths and challenges. We think that the initial supply chain in aviation is likely to be established using oleochemical-based production because it's commercial just now. It's less hydrogen dependent, and there's considerable potential for growth. But the area here is more on the feedstock. We also think there will be an issue with hydrogen. Where do you get the hydrogen from? And in the longer term, it's more likely that the thermochemical pathway will be used, mainly because the biochemical route gives you very high value intermediates that might have more chemical applications. So I encourage you to look at the TAS 39 report to get more detail. In summary, I thank my colleagues Susan Van Dyke, Sergius Karatas, Jim McMillan, all my IA colleagues, and thanks for your attention, and I'll hand it back over to you, Nick.
Thank you very much, Jack. We have collected quite a few questions. We're also running over, and I think the presentations have been very, very interesting. We have time, and I certainly hope that the presenters can stay maybe for another 5 or 10 minutes, and we can answer a couple questions. But I think we only have time to maybe ask each presenter one question. But we do have many other questions. We've recorded all of these. We will share these with the presenters, and provided they feel like answering in email form, we will post these online and inform everyone. So I'd like to start by asking Mark a question. Mark, I've unmuted you. We've received a couple questions about the same topic, and we'd like to combine them. Someone in the audience wanted to know about market prospects beyond bioethanol and biodiesel. Could you discuss biofuel production from feedstocks which do not compete with food, such as microalgae, camelina, woody biomass, municipal solid waste, or other products such as butanol, HEFA, methanol, synthetic kerosene?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can shortly go into that. As I think was already mentioned in one or two of the other presentations, typically the advanced biofuel routes that use wood, straw, or other lignocellulosic biomass for photosynthesis or for advanced ethanol production, they are typically still substantially more costly than the conventional ones. So in that sense, that is a clear illustration of the technology challenge that there is, that these options really need to break down and go down in their learning curve and go to more competitive cost levels. I mean, that is possible in the coming decades. On the other hand, for that, a very essential precondition is market development and stable policy. So that's typically the challenge to policymakers to make that happen and make it work. Yeah, something of the wildcat option in this entire play is, of course, aquatic biomass. So to what extent can we use algae or macroalgae in the production of biofuels? Currently, of course, the main challenges in that field are in the cultivation of the stuff or the harvesting of it. And there are indications that, let's say, macroalgae, really the bigger weeds to be produced offshore, have a better prospect than microalgae to be produced in bioreactors, because in terms of costs and also in terms of land use, the former seem to be more appealing. But then again, the cultivation technology needs to be there, feedstock needs to be brought on land, and you need to make a biofuel of it. And that has such a couple of challenges that it will typically require quite some time still to have those options to the market. And I have hardly seen any cost estimates that are related to that. So I find it very difficult to say anything sensible about that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good.
Next question will be for Gerald Weber. The question is, could you discuss some of the technical challenges, i.e. strict quality requirements of syngas, lots of separation steps, and also quite high production costs to meet pretreatment, suitable for a large scale? Where do we now in terms of overcoming some of the technical barriers?
Okay, thank you for the question. Technical barriers, yes. So for the synthesis itself, the gas cleaning is quite cost intensive. This is very important. So to look that they have their the right material and also like for example for the gas cleaning you need activated carbon, that they have their regeneration of the carbon. For biomass, do they have a good quality of the biomass, like also for the water content, that you have a drying of the biomass. It's quite important to have also a constant operation for a gasification unit, because this can also make problems then. So this is very important to have for the as a good pre-cleaning. Particle size is very important, and also the drying for the synthesis is the main part. The gas cleaning, the reactor itself. Depending which technology you're using. For example, we are using a slurry reactor. This is quite good for upscaling, but there are also other technologies like microchannel reactors. They are, you can say, for smaller scale. When you want to go to bigger scale, you should have slurry reactors, like also for cold gasification, for example. So that's some comments.
Well, certainly. Thank you. And we'll have our last question directed at Jack Sadler. Jack, there are a lot of ongoing efforts and private initiatives for commercialization of technology deployment. However, it would be interesting to learn where we are currently in terms of deploying liquid jet fuels. What is the realistic potential of biofuels for aviation and shipping in, let's say, 2020 or 2030, and how cost competitive are they?
So good and tough question. So I think again, during the discussions with our group is that the census is the easiest way to get there just now is using what we call oleochemicals. So really, from palm oil, use cooking oil, tall oil. So that will be the technology that will get things going. I think we recognize that even when oil was $100 a barrel, the cost method of this was a bit of a challenge. So there would have to be some sort of policy driver, in the same way the policy was used to get diesel and ethanol into the market. marketplace initially. So our sense is that with the right policy drivers and using an oleochemical approach, we can probably get the supply chain in place. In the meantime, during that time, you will basically be scaling up some of the different technologies that I mentioned before, the biomass or the sugar or the alcohol technologies. But again, I think there's an appreciation that we'll need some sort of policy driver in the short term just to basically access the marketplace. If it's just done on straight economics right now, it's going to be very tough to do, particularly with oil prices. So short answer is that I'm optimistic, but it won't be easy, and it will take about 10 to 15 years to actually get out there in terms of more of a commercial scale.
Okay, so more in the 2030 timeframe. I think.
Yeah, I think for it to be fully commercial.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Unfortunately today we didn't have much time to actually have a full discussion. The topic is so broad and deep and advanced. I think that would have been very difficult even with multiple hours. So we hope certainly that we were able to provide some glimpses into general market developments, into some specific technologies, and into this emerging discussion around drop-in fuels for aviation in particular. So I think it was a very interesting discussion we had today. We received quite a number of comments, which, as I mentioned, will be communicated to the panelists, and they will have the opportunity to respond, and we will continue that online. Let me just say that from our side, the next steps is that we will actually summarize this discussion. We will make the presentations available online along with the summary document. And this discussion and that document and these questions will be used in the preparation of our next REmap roadmap and transport roadmap. We also have another webinar in the coming months that will look at new and other innovative technologies in sustainable transport. I expect this will take place next month in late October. If you'd like to find out more, you're welcome to visit irena.org/remap. This is also where those presentations will be posted next week. You're also welcome to email us at remap@irena.org. I'd like to thank one last time the presenters for taking the time and also for staying with us 25 minutes or so over time. Thank you to the listeners as well for doing the same. A video of this presentation will be made available on YouTube and our IRELP webpage. And the questions will, of course, be addressed at the IRENA community, along with presentations. With that, I'd like to conclude the webinar, and thank you for joining.